Greetings, Off-Season After Dark fans. Glad to have you here for episode 56, and I'm very happy to say we have Cody here from Locked On Oklahoma State. Glad to talk about the Cowboys, a team who, one of our common subjects here, Cody, is coaching changes, roster turnover, which is why I wanted to have you on for a while. It should be a very fun team, project to talk about. So, first of all, before we get into OSU too much, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about where they can follow you and what got you following Oklahoma State? How long have you been a fan? What got you into covering them?
Yeah, you can find me daily Locked On Oklahoma State show at All Day O State on X. It's O State All Day on all the other social media platforms. As it pertains to my Oklahoma State fandom, right? I grew up as an Oklahoma State fan to some degree. My dad was a diehard Oklahoma State fan. So it was a lot of orange and black in my house. I will tell you the year that it really kind of kicked in for me was the 1995 Bedlam W. And then my dad got a season tickets in 1997. And since then, it's just been, I don't know, man, a love for the game kind of thing. Now, I unfortunately wasn't good enough to play at Oklahoma State, so I had to play smaller college football. But I always felt like my entire life growing up, in order for you to get Oklahoma State information, you had to flip through 6 pages of OU crap before you got to 1 page of Oklahoma State. It's legitimately how it was. And even as the Mike Gundy years were growing and you had the Brandon Whedons and the Des Bryants and the Justin Blackmans and the Mason Rudolphs and the Chuba Hubbards and all of that, even during that time, I felt like our media reach just wasn't the same as some of the other schools in the Big 12. And I always vowed that if I could ever do anything to just try to get more Oklahoma State info out there, I would love to do it. And I'm blessed to have this opportunity here.
That's a great goal and a mindset for building your channel. I always ask people that, and I think that's one of the more unique answers I've gotten. So I appreciate that. That's awesome. Yep. But I think for us, especially with Oklahoma State, the logical place to start is the end of the Mike Gundy tenure. I mean, 21 years there, Cowboy legend, did great things for the university, but it was time to move on.
Yeah, I think, unfortunately, man, he is a byproduct of this NIL portal era, right? I think after the 2021 season where we went 12-1 and we beat Notre Dame in the Fiesta Bowl and he got to hold that big trophy up and say, we have a logo too, that put Oklahoma State finally, I think, in the stratosphere that we felt like we belonged in for a handful of years. And then the portal era kicked in and the NIL era kicked in. And there was guys like Nick Saban and Dabo Swinney and Mike Gundy that were all saying, I don't want to do this. I don't want to be involved in the portal. I don't want to be involved in NIL. Mike Gundy even said at Big 12 Media Days last year that he originally thought it was going to be a flash in the pan, right? He thought it was going to be a one-hit wonder and it was going to go. Yeah.
Okay.
And the downside to that for Mike Gundy is he established himself as the dude that would go find the 2-star and 3-star Brandon Whedons and Justin Blackmans and turn them into NFL guys. That has I don't know, all of our success basically. And you can't do that in the portal era as much anymore. If you don't have a guy that's contributing within 2 years, you kind of got to move him out of the way to bring in somebody in that can contribute immediately. And I think all of that was the perfect crescendo for the end of the Mike Gundy era. If NIL and portal hadn't happened, I do think Gundy probably did have this thing figured out like a well-oiled machine, but he was just so apprehensive to embrace the fact that this was probably going to stick around that we didn't have any cachet or cash to get back into the ball game.
I think that's a great way to put it. Yeah, we've certainly seen some guys who had, and in Dabo's case, continue to have very long tenures, but the success isn't there the way it was before.
Right.
So, and another guy we're seeing it with, and it's a unique situation, but Calhoun at Air Force. They were that they were using NIL anyway, but their results have dropped off a lot the last couple of years since then.
So, I think Jimbo Fisher is another one. Well, he also got like $100 million to go home with. Did. That changes it a little bit.
It certainly does. Yeah, we've talked about that a few times on our group show. Let me with Gundy though, like you had mentioned, that 12-2 season Fiesta Bowl win. Then in 2023, 2 years later, you win 10 games, which was height of the portal era, was he, how did he have such a good year in the portal era? Was it a lot of guys he had managed to keep that were older, or what dynamic was going on that season?
You nailed it, man. It took up until the Big 12 championship game against Texas for anybody to figure out how to stop Ollie Gordon. And then on the defensive side of the ball, you had several NFL caliber dudes like Nick Martin and Colin Oliver that are still doing their daggone thing. And at the end of the day, man, it just, I don't know, man. I think he had a lot of seniority. I think he had a lot of guys that were still part of that Cowboy culture mantra that had also physically gotten bigger, faster, stronger, enough to be competitive, not to mention the fact they knew the system. You know, they weren't going to have a lot of distractions in the locker room, and it culminated with a perfect storm, and we outplayed our capabilities. I think when you go back and look at that 2023 season, it was a lot of close games, a lot of one-win ball games, but really the exposure moment was Texas. And yes, athletically, they did have a lot on us, but more importantly, they were the first team to say, you know what? We're going to put 8-9 dudes in the box every stinking play, and we're going to make Oklahoma State beat us over the top. And I think possibly if people would have established that earlier, maybe we don't reach the Big 12 title game, but people were still trying to play us fairly,
they were
squared up.
Not realizing you had the leading power conference rusher in the country that year. And that was the year Ollie Gordon went off. Yeah.
Yes, and he was 95% of the offense.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I remember looking at his stat line there. I think yesterday I was going through that, and it was 21 touchdowns, 1,400 yards. Like, somebody should have figured it out earlier than they did, like you had just mentioned. So, but
and even the next year, that's where it continued, right? When people saw what Texas did, they were like, okay, well, let's just do that. And it was a disaster, right? That very next season we went from 10 wins to 3 wins with 89% of the same exact roster.
Okay. Interesting.
And again,
I knew he was there. I didn't know all of the rest of the roster was also there. So that's interesting. Yeah.
Now, we had high hopes, man. We had, after a 10-win season and 89% of the roster back and all 5 of the offensive linemen and the running back and 2 wide receivers, we had tons of hope, but it just didn't work out. And I think, again, part of that is Mike Gundy had players leave in the portal, but he wasn't replacing them in the portal with equal caliber.
Yeah, that's absolutely. Yes, I think that's
so we got in a position where 2 injuries was catastrophic.
Yeah, absolutely. So now moving into last year, 2025, Gundy's last year. You win the season opener in your FCS game against UT Martin. Gundy coaches a couple more games, then is gone. Doug Meacham comes in as the interim. Then don't win any more games. But the last 3 games actually were, they were all 1-possession games. It was a lot of bad games then. K-State, UCF, Iowa State, all competitive games. Did the team get better, or were they just due to have those games? What was the trend like there?
The team got, I don't want to say substantially better, right? Because you're right, we didn't end up winning another game, but we got noticeably better. I'll say that. Okay. With, you ready for this? The backups. So while Mike Gundy was reluctant for NIL and portal for a long time, last year he was kind of forced, right? You remember the Board of Regents thing, and he might get fired? You remember all that?
Yes, I do. Yeah.
So after that, he was kind of forced into, I don't know, handing over some of the decision making and handing over some of the NIL involvement to some degree. And we went out and we paid players. We spent like 12, 13 mil last year. The problem is we paid for the wrong dudes. And instead of starting the guys who actually gave a crap, we kept starting the guys who were getting all the NIL dollars.
Okay.
And so whenever we had interim coaches, Doug Meacham, right, he put up an admirable effort. But the biggest noticeable difference was when Clint Bowen was elevated from basically an analyst to the defensive coordinator. That is when you've seen a different team, because that's when you started seeing a lot of the backups, especially on defense. And as you mentioned, the last 5 games were pretty close. I know the last 3 from a score perspective were, but there was even a game in there, I believe it was Cincinnati, that we were down to the wire with them. And then the fourth quarter, they scored a couple touchdowns and kind of made it look ugly. But even that game was very, very, very close in the fourth quarter. And it's because of the players who actually gave a crap. Like, there's still something to be said about giving a crap about the name on the front of the jersey. We don't see a lot of it anymore. And NIL is a major component. But you have to have NIL with guys that want to be there, guys that are willing to run through a brick wall because they want that team to be successful and that university to be successful. And you're just not, you haven't seen a ton of that, but you are seeing it again in Stillwater right now.
And every school at that level, every college has their niche, what makes them unique. You have to find that to, I think, truly be successful and get meaningful buy-in from the guys on your roster, whether they be guys you recruited out of high school or guys who came in from the portal. So I think that's well said. When, after the season was done, or I guess in your case, even before it was over, you knew the head coaching cycle was going, you were looking for guys. Was Eric Morris the guy you wanted from the get-go based on what he was doing at North Texas, or were you looking at multiple guys?
No, I mean, my top three initially were G.J. Kinney at Texas State, Eric Morris at North Texas, and Alex Galesh at South Florida, right? Those are not only guys that had been proven to kind of rebuild programs, but more importantly, I felt like, and we'll see if this is the right side of history or not, but at the time, I felt like the Indiana Kurt Cignetti model was the model a lot of ADs were going to try to somewhat replicate. And the only coach that I felt like could get the Mestemakers, Hawkins, Wyatt Youngs, all of the defensive players to come with him was Eric Morris or Alex Galesh. So I did feel like those were the two best candidates to have a transfer portal class that did have some familiarity with the schematics. And we got one of the guys.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. It's also interesting that you said Golish is the other guy doing very similar things at Auburn, where much of that, their best players. But, and in fact, in his case, he might have had too many guys follow him to Auburn. I think they took a lot of guys that may have been only fringe guys, but we'll see. Maybe I'm wrong. Yeah.
But I think you hit the nail on the head, right? At the end of the day, what Alex Galesh didn't have that Eric Morris does have is he got like 90-something% of the staff to come with him, and the GA or the general manager. Sorry, you got the GM, you got 18 of the top 20 players, you got all of your staff, and I think you had a lot of success in the transfer portal. Like, people are going to continuously talk about the North Texas transfers, but that's a little bit of a mirage.
Really, the only meaningful staff member you didn't get was Jordan Davis, that went to be the O coordinator at East Carolina. And I think in his case, it was the matter of, if I go to Oklahoma State, Eric is still going to be the play caller. If I go here, I'm going to get the chance to be my own play caller. And I understand that. It makes sense from a career standpoint.
That's it, man. Sean Brophy understands the system. He knows the lay of the land. He's been with Morris for a lot of years. But
Skylar Cassidy's a good D coordinator.
Yeah, I think so, man. You've heard a lot of the players call him a genius. The last coordinator that I remember this many players saying he's an absolute genius was Jim Knowles. Now, am I saying Skylar Cassidy is going to be anything like Jim Knowles? Not necessarily, but he has a high IQ, cerebral-based mind that is more worried about technique and flow and making sure that 11 guys move at the exact same time, the exact same way. He's more about the little technical stuff, as opposed to last year's defensive coordinator at Oklahoma State, Todd Grantham. He was that old SEC, just beat your face into the wall and hopefully it gets results. And it didn't. And part of that is played the wrong.
They were way more rigid on defense with Grantham, and that's kind of been his MO. It's that we're just going to line up as a 4-3 and play in the trenches, and our defensive backs are going to cover guys. And it's not applicable everywhere. It wasn't in the Big 12 because people don't play like that. Yeah.
He's used to having defensive SEC-sized D-lines.
Yes. You're used to having 2 D tackles that can clog up 4 O-linemen and everybody else gets to scrape off of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
So, yeah. But, looking at, we talked about the staff, Morris coming over. So when Morris came in, say when he got the job, day one, week one, when he's brand new, what was his mantra? What was the message he was trying to tell the fans in the Cowboy Nation?
That it's okay to have expectations.
Okay.
It's okay to have lofty goals. It's also okay for us to understand that the number one priority was camaraderie. Like, he wanted this thing to be, it's going to sound trivial when I say it, but almost like a high school feel.
Okay.
Right? Me and you were talking off air. We both got to play a little bit of college ball. And a lot of us look back at our high school days as the most memorable because you did get to do everything with your buddy. You got to go fishing with them. You got to go fighting with them. You got to go down to the creek with them. You got to go out to eat with them. And then you got to go bang hands on a football field with them. You got to go to class with them. So there was a much more tight-knit feeling in the locker room in high school that you'd lose a little bit in college. And that was what he wanted to get here in Stillwater, Oklahoma, because Mike Gundy, being old school in certain areas, was very regimented in certain categories. Okay. And I think one of those didn't allow the players to build bonds off the field like we have now. Okay. Because man, kind of like the name on the front of the jersey is supposed to matter as well. There's something to be said in tight games in the fourth quarter when everybody's exhausted that you're going to go a little bit harder, dive a little bit further, chase down a ball from behind a little bit faster if you give a crap about the dude next to you. Oklahoma State didn't have that the last couple seasons. That should be the most visible breath of fresh air this year.
That's good to know. Yeah, I think that's, again, well worded. I didn't quite see it through that. I wasn't looking to see it that way of, what went wrong with Gundy was you identified the wrong players and then let them still be individuals essentially and didn't force any assimilation into the program. Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it.
I'll tell you when I knew that we were cooked last year is when I got a phone call from some people leaving the locker room fussing up a storm because at halftime against Tulsa, we're losing, to a team we haven't lost to in 27 years. And a lot of the players on defense were talking about the jewelry store that they were going to on Sunday or Saturday because it was a Friday game, and what trucks they were going to go car shopping for over the weekend. None of them in that circle were talking about the game and why they were screwing up and how embarrassing it is that we're losing to flipping Tulsa. That's when I knew that we were SOL. And again, that's how I also knew there was some backups that still bled orange, that still wanted to play. They wanted to run through walls, and they were being hamstrung by coaches that were playing favorites predicated upon primarily, in my opinion, likely NIL.
Probably. Yeah, I'm sure you want to keep the guys happy who you're paying the most money to was their mindset. And in the end, those coaches probably saw it as, we're on the hot seat, my job is on the line. These guys will give me the best chance to win because they're making the most money. Well, this isn't the NFL model in every way. In the NFL, usually your highest paid guys will be your best. But in college, we're still in the early infancies of NIL, where that model gets flawed way more frequently than it does in the NFL.
Well, I think you could easily make an argument or find some evidentiary proof somewhere that this has just been an absolute disaster. And you mentioned it. How many players out here have got the bag, right, as the kids like to say, and barely even played? Like, there's probably more of those stories than the Drew Mestemaker kind of stories. Like, if Mestemaker has an 8, 9, 10 win season, he will justify his price tag. He will justify why a lot of prognostications have him as a top 10, top 15 draft pick. But if he wins 4 games and he only throws for 2,500 yards, people are going to be like, why'd we spend that money, right?
I talked about one of those guys a couple days ago with one of my buddies, and Spencer Sanders, who transferred, did nothing after he transferred. It's yeah.
Yeah, he left. We could get deep into the weeds on that deal.
There were injury concerns there. I know. I don't know how much of a role that played, but we know the shoulder thing was real. Yeah.
Yeah, he played through some injuries that he probably, shouldn't, which did play a factor. There were some other like guarantees made to him because he was the first NIL recipient at Oklahoma State, and he got an Eskimo Joe's restaurant deal. Yeah, okay. And it was going to be worth $473,000 if he would have stayed, but there was some guarantees made to him that we did not live up to, and then you factor in some of the injury stuff, and we made Spencer Sanders' exit very, very easy and complicated.
Okay, I didn't know that. That's very interesting. Okay,
I know. Almost an oxymoron. Yeah, I get it, but
yeah. But I even the part about I didn't know he was the first NIL recipient there either. So
the first big time.
Yeah. Quarterback.
Yeah, Trace Ford and Brendan Presley got NIL deals around the same time, but they were not even in the same hemisphere as $470K.
Okay. So now we always dive into the roster a bit. My viewers usually like this, but you already mentioned Mestemaker. It seemed like the perfect marriage. When Morris gets the job, it's we need a QB. This kid's a stud. He knows the system. It seemed like a match made in heaven. And so far, it probably has been. Now, we haven't played an opponent yet, but it looks to be solid.
100%. And the fact that there was a little bit of trepidation in there makes it even a little bit more exhilarating, right? Because Indiana, Alabama, Oregon were all over Drew Mestemaker, and they were offering more money than we had to offer. But at the end of the day, it came down to Oklahoma State and Oregon. Eric Morris has kind of shared this story. They have a very close relationship, right? So he was honest with Coach Morris, and he said, listen, I am contemplating this Oregon deal. And Eric Morris said, hey, listen, don't forget that the ride we've been on together. Don't forget that we're not done with this ride. And don't break my heart. And he hung up. And Mestemaker's like, yeah, he's right, man. We have done this together. He did give me an opportunity when I hadn't played quarterback in 4.5 years.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you came in as a safety, and it's
played
great
safety
story,
and punter in high school.
Yep. Then looking at that QB room, backup wise, will Grant Jordan, is he going to be the number 2 QB most likely?
As the season starts, yeah.
Okay. So about a month or two ago, I had on the Curse of You guys to do a UMass podcast, so we talked a little bit about him and going there. Yeah.
He's a wily, reliable veteran that obviously has a lot of playing time at a couple different stops, right? Previously, he was at Yale, where I think he made a lot of his, hay, per se. I've heard some people in the facilities say, I don't know how true it is, but I've heard some players that have been here for 5 years that say that Grant Jordan would have started over Alan Bowman.
Oh, okay. That's high praise there. That doesn't just happen in a nutshell. I mean, you have to be a good guy to start over someone who also had that much experience and tools. So,
but there is still a competition because Brody Veers he's pretty good, right? He's very athletic. He's very kind of Spencer Sanders-esque.
Okay.
He can athletically do things that Grant can't.
From?
Come again?
Is Veers an Oklahoma guy?
No, he's from Chandler, Arizona.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah. Sorry, I cut you off there at the end. What were you saying?
Oh, no. I can't even remember.
That's all right.
I have the memory of a snail sometimes.
Yeah, it happens to us all. But the one thing I think a lot of our viewers out there who weren't following the North Texas football last year and may not have realized is Mestemaker threw for 4,300 yards, 34 touchdowns, and by most metrics, they have the number 1 offense in the nation. So we're dealing with someone who put up uber numbers last year, and that brings us to running backs. Caleb Hawkins, a guy who had, I believe, one other D1 offer other than North Texas, and then a couple of D2 offers, goes to UNT last year, is all over the field. I mean, just was an unbelievable running back last year in his first year, playing.
True freshman.
1,400 yards. Yep. 1,400 yards, 25 touchdowns, 30-plus catches. Their backfield's going to be getting together again, so he also followed Morris. Now, was his portaling over similar to Mestemaker? Was it pretty efficient? Because I also remember, other big schools wanted Hawkins as well. So what was his like?
His was much easier than Drew Mestemaker's. Like he did have a lot of offers because last year he was 6'2", he was 6'2", 207. He didn't even start the first few games, by the way. So he put up 1,400 yards as a true freshman without even being the starter. So yes, he was highly coveted in the transfer portal, but he's even come out and said the millisecond he heard about Morris and Coach Patrick Cobbs going to Oklahoma State, it was over. He didn't care who called, who did what. He's a Shawnee, Oklahoma native. So this was his dream. He grew up an Oklahoma State fan. He fantasized about these games. He's been coming to Oklahoma State games since he was a little bitty kid. He got to jump on the field and rush the field for multiple Bedlam wins. This was his Notre Dame, Oregon, Ohio State. So he was easy.
Awesome. Great. Good. I didn't know, tougher, more difficult. So that's awesome.
Well, and the biggest benefit there is, again, he was like 6'2", 207 last year. He is 6'2", 225, and according to the coaches, he's gotten faster.
Oh, I did hear he got bigger. I didn't know about the faster
He gained 22 pounds and apparently shaved off a half a second or so off his 40.
That is fantastic.
That's Ollie Gordon. That's a clone of Ollie Gordon, what that is.
Yeah. I mean, there will not be many more physically impressive running backs in the country. And his back, the number 2 back, Iowa DI, was very good at JMU. He is another guy, bounced around, has played at multiple schools. Last year, didn't play a ton, but
he got buried a little bit last year.
Yeah, he was at North Texas. Then went to JMU. Now is back with these guys. So
yeah, you're right. So offense is going to be simplistic to him. The verbiage is going to be easy. The playbook, the scheme, all of that's going to be pretty much. It's going to be a little different than it was 2 years ago, but not much. Right, 95% of the verbiage and the schemes are going to be the same, which is going to be huge for him. You also got Trey Page coming in that I think could be a very valuable asset in the backfield. You got William Mason from right up the road at UCO, who's another big-time power back, 6'2", 235-ish. Then here's the X factor, though. Keep your eye out for Cody Batman Jones, true freshman, 4-star out of Jinx, Oklahoma. His dad was an All-American defensive back at OU, right? So that was a contentious point of recruiting. Yep. So his son is kind of, joined the bright side, as we like to say, to get away from the dark side. Good. And in the scrimmage Saturday, he's kind of been, rotating in that RB3 role. But Saturday, he had a couple massive runs. He was juking people out of his shoes. He had like a 30-yard touchdown that almost makes you feel like, okay, this true freshman might separate himself at some point in time in the season. It might be week 3, week 4, week 7, week 8. But I do think that the talent and versatility of Cody Batman Jones to go alongside Caleb Hawkins is going to be hard to pass up. But again, if you're thinking about a Thunder and Lightning package, Iowa Day and Trey Page do accomplish the same thing. I just think that Cody Batman Jones maybe has a little bit more wiggle to him, which could be a good compliment to Caleb Hawkins.
Yes, definitely. Those system fits and durability there could be important in getting other looks and being able to have a different skill set. So that's good to know. Now, receiving room, Wyatt Young comes over. He'll be starting in one of those spots. He had almost 100 targets last year in that system, was uber productive at North Texas.
Yep.
Justin Bowick comes in. And then Chris Barnes, I saw, was listed as the other starter. Bowick well-traveled, Ball State, and then was at Illinois last year. And Chris Barnes was at Wake Forest last year. Wazoo before that. He had followed Jake Dickert to multiple schools, and is with the Cowboys now. So what about, tell us about the receiving room. And I know I left out some guys who transferred in and will be playing. There certainly should be a lot of balls to go around here. What should we know about the receiver room?
I got a crazy one for you. Wyatt Young, just like Drew Mestemaker and Caleb Hawkins, had tons of opportunities because he put up over 1,200 yards this previous season. He's only been playing wide receiver. This is his third year of his life playing wide receiver. He played quarterback his whole life, all the way through high school, the whole 9 yards. So he's still kind of getting familiar with route trees and concepts and when to settle down in zones as opposed to, try to be a man beater. I think that even though we'll see an emergence this year out of Wyatt Young, Justin Bowick might be the name we talk about most by the end of the season. You cannot teach 6'4", 6'5", 230 pounds with a 40-inch vertical. You cannot teach that. And he's another one that while he was at Illinois, he was laser guided 4.4, pretty adequate speed. He's now in the 4.3 range at Oklahoma State. So you got a dude approaching 6'5", 230 that runs a 4.3 with a 39.95 vertical. I'm sorry, bro. There's not a lot of DBs in many conferences that are going to have an easy time with that, especially when you have to respect Wyatt Young on the other side. You mentioned Chris Barnes had like 632 yards last year at Wake Forest. He was obviously their deep threat, and you're seeing a lot of clips coming out of camp in Stillwater. He is that guy. He may not be Tyreek Hill fast because not many people are, but he's going to take the top off of defenses. And while everybody's focused on Drew Mestemaker and Caleb Hawkins and Justin Bowick and Wyatt Young, there's going to be this little dude sprinting down the field that not very many people can catch up to. You did talk about some of the portal additions. You also got Terrence Lewis, transfer from North Texas. He had a massive weekend Saturday as well. And even Eric Morris this morning in a press conference said that he showed those brilliant moments at North Texas, but he was very inconsistent, right? So he would have phenomenal days, and then he would have below average days. So he would go back and forth. Eric Moore said that he has put together 8 consecutive practices that are by far the best he's ever seen. So Terrence Lewis could be a factor, a big factor in this wide receiver room as the season progresses as well.
Another interesting one is Israel Polk. He had a pretty good season at Akron last year, had 8 touchdowns, and is a guy who physically 6'2", $180, good size guy.
Yeah, I think
he was one that
he had 740 yards, something to that effect. And then we also had Rodney Harris II come over from Ohio. He's another one of those kind of go up and get it. I think he had like 550-ish, 700, 600 yards, something to that effect this previous season as well at Ohio. So, yeah, you get a 700-yard receiver at Akron. You get an almost 600-yard receiver that come over from Ohio. And I do want to remind people, go back and watch the film on Ohio last year. They were pretty darn good. They beat West Virginia last year.
They were good.
They were very, very, very competitive. And I think they still right now.
They got a solid program. They're always good. They got a solid program. Yeah.
I think they have the longest home winning streak in the country right now.
Interesting. Okay.
They're up there, top 2 or 3.
I mean they've been consistent for a number of years, so I would believe it. Yeah. Will Donovan Green be the tight end? Is that the likely former LSU, former A&M? Who will be that guy?
Well, it sounds like it's going to be Carson Kolb, who is an Oregon State transfer that was converted from linebacker to tight end. That and then Oscar Hammond. So up until this last week or so, it looked like it was going to be Oscar Hammond, who was going to be our top tight end last year if he hadn't gotten injured. He's another guy that was at North Texas a couple years ago. He was going to be the primary tight end last year, got hurt. He didn't get to play until like the last 2 games of the season. So we didn't really get to see a lot of Oscar Hammond last year. But throughout spring and coming into fall camp, he was the guy that was going to compete with Donovan Green. And then throughout fall camp, Carson Kolb has just kept ticking up. He's another guy who had a big weekend and had a 25-ish yard touchdown himself. That was pretty impressive. So I think it's going to be former linebacker, Oregon State transfer, converted to tight end, Carson Kolb, and then Oscar Hammond will play a big piece.
Okay.
Donovan Green and Brody Boydston, they will play a role, right? You got to think about it. He didn't play a lot at LSU, but he was a consensus 4-star, 5-star level dude when he was at Texas A&M. He had some shine at A&M, and then it just didn't work out. Goes to LSU. They packed the pounds on him, try to turn him into a blocking tight end.
Yeah.
And you thought that all the pieces were there. If you could take the freshman year at A&M and the new blocking component at LSU, and you put those together and make a beautiful baby, Oklahoma State should be the biggest recipients of that. It just, for whatever reason, it sounds like Carson Kolb and Oscar Hammond have kind of controlled that position as we get into fall camp.
Good to know. Yeah. That definitely is not what I expected to hear. So always.
No, when you have a former 5-star guy that might be tight end number 3, it's probably a good thing.
Yep, definitely. And then to continue, one of our, North Texas connections here, on the O-line, Braden Nelson was probably their best O-lineman last year. He came up certainly one of the better ones. And he came over, likely will be at left tackle. And then Joseph Hansen, I the depth chart I was looking at, listed him at right tackle. He was a Coastal Carolina guy last year. So what about, I will say, didn't get as deep into the interior O-line. What do we expect out of those guys, and who will they be?
Well, unfortunately, Braden Nelson is going to be out for a little bit. We don't have a timeline on when he's going to be back. It could be week 2, week 3. We have no clue. But thankfully, we were able to go get Jacob Sexton from OU, who had 997 snaps as a Sooner, who is a massive contributor for them, had a couple ACL deals that kind of put him behind the 8 ball for the last year and a half, 2 years or so. But the players that have been on the show or that we've talked to collectively say at 6'7", 330 pounds, he's probably the most athletic dude on the roster. He's out there doing flips and cartwheels and all this other crazy stuff. Now, does that equate to being a great offensive lineman? Not necessarily, but thankfully, he has a ton of OU tape that validates that he can be that guy. And then we also got Ashton Lepo, another 6'7", 320-pound dude out of Michigan State, right? It's always funny when you get into the portal and you look at the message boards. The 2 players that stood out, message boards were freaking out, was Ashton Lepo leaving Michigan State. Michigan State message boards were going nuts about how this guy could leave. And the other one was Isaiah Chisholm, linebacker from UCLA, which I'm sure we're going to get to a little bit later. But sticking with the offensive line, there's a competition right now. Ashton Lepo is involved, as well as Sean Torgerson. And this is a guy that I've talked about a few times on the show. Yeah. He played last year as a redshirt freshman at Portland State. He had the most snaps on the entire team, which is super rare for an offensive lineman. Usually you try to get your O-lineman breathers. Portland State did not do that. They were like, this is our power forward D1 dude. We're going to keep him on the field all daggone game. And now he comes to Oklahoma State. He wasn't supposed to factor into the starting rotation, but he's had a really, really good camp. He's competing with somebody like an Ashton Lepo, who has 12 starts at Michigan State under his belt, a lot of snaps, a lot of quality, I think, mixed in those snaps. You mentioned Joseph Hansen. He definitely could be a factor and a contributor at a starting tackle spot. You mentioned the interior dudes. The biggest one, I think, is probably going to be Tyler Mercer. Tyler Mercer, the center, came over from KU, but another one of those guys that was at North Texas 2 years ago. So he does know the lingo. He knows the scheme, knows the system, knows the verbiage, knows the protections, knows the shifts and all that, and identifications. Plus, he also has a little bit of Big 12 ball under his belt, so he knows what that's supposed to look like as well. He should be the captain on the line that helps Drew Mestemaker, right? You know this. The center is always an extension of the quarterback.
Yeah.
If you've got a center that's in the same atmosphere, headspace as the quarterback, you can do a lot more silent counts. You can do a lot more fun things that don't tip off the defense just because you have that cohesion. That should be absolutely massive for Oklahoma State. But even if it's not, buddy, we got Jacoby Sanders back, who did start a lot of games last year at guard for Oklahoma State. He's a Stillwater, Oklahoma native, 6'3", 300-pound dude that has a lot of experience, can play center, can play guard, all 3 spots. So if something were to go down, I feel pretty confident there. We got Louis Canepa back, right? He was a big portal addition this previous year out of New Mexico State, but he got injured. He was going to start last year, but he got hurt. We didn't really get to see him. He's back into the mix this year. I think Jacob Sexton is going to be either a starting tackle or a starting guard. Then you could slide in a Jacoby Sanders into that other spot relatively easily. And then Joseph Hansen has a ton of snaps.
Yeah.
There's not going to be a lot that confuses him. But I think Tyler Mercer, Jacob Sexton, Ashton Lepo, and Sean Torgerson are worthy of conversation in and of themselves. I think, real quick, Sean Torgerson, I think last year at Portland State, he had a stretch over like 450 snaps where he only gave up 2 sacks.
It's impressive.
And he's 6'4", 210, which you don't normally see at a Portland State.
Yeah, you don't. No. One thing that made it tough for me looking at this position group was in the depth charts I'll look at, and I try to pull them from multiple places. Well, with all of the guys that came in as transfers, I think a lot of the people making the depth charts, they didn't know who was going to play guard, who was going to play tackle. Was it left? Was it right? So I saw all of these different combinations and, mix and matches. So I had no idea of, who's actually going to play where and who's going to be backing up who and so on. So I'm glad.
And then you also have, you mentioned, Braden Nelson and I mentioned being hurt. You've also got Johnny Dixon III that came over from North Texas. And there's a lot of high praise about that individual as well.
Okay. Good. Yeah. He was one, and in the guys that did transfer from UNT, he was one of them that I think just got lost in the shuffling or wasn't as notable, probably because of the position. But that is good to know. Yeah. Though I know in the depth charts I looked at, both of them actually did list him as a starter at right guard. So Dixon,
he should be. He should be.
Yeah.
And in an ideal scenario, Jacob Sexton would be the other guard. You have Sean Torgerson on one side, Ashton Lepo on another, or perhaps you could put somebody like a Hansen on the opposite side. So I think that it's just nice that we somewhat have options this year, which I don't think we could say the last year and a half.
That's fair. Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. Let's move over to the defensive side of the ball. So with Cassidy, new D coordinator, how are the Cowboys going to line up on defense? Is always one of the first questions I ask.
I think, at least, here's what I'll say. For the first game of the season, I think you will see his kind of traditional 3-3-5, 4-2-5 hybrid. After the first game, I think we might see something way different.
Okay. That's, I wasn't because that 3-3-5, some guys love it, some don't touch it. You don't know how it's going to work against some opponents. So I wasn't sure if that was going to be the base or not, even though in what I was reading and looking at it was listed as the base D.
Yeah, you've heard a lot, right? This is not necessarily a state secret. They've been doing a lot of 4-man front stuff, and they've been doing a lot of experimentation with having that additional linebacker, safety, defensive end hybrid kind of dude, right? That Von Miller style of role.
Yes.
They've been doing a lot of experimentation with some of that. Now, does that mean that they're going to, turn it on during a game day? You never know. Right? We really do not know until they're going to take the field. But what I will say is if there is going to be some new wrinkles and different variations within this defense, you darn sure don't want to show Tulsa that. You want to show Tulsa exactly what you did at North Texas and Sam Houston State.
Yeah. You want to be as base and vanilla as you can be in that opener. Yes,
which kind of stinks, man, because as an Oklahoma State fan, after losing to Tulsa for the first time in 27 years, you kind of want to go in there and beat their head around and drag them around the field. But I think that we would probably tip our hand too much on both sides of the ball.
You don't want to give Oregon too much for week 2. Yeah.
Nope. Not when they have 2 new coordinators and they got to come to Stillwater at 11 a.m. You don't want to give them anything.
No. And that'll be an exciting game to see. Very looking forward to that week 2 matchup. But D-line, we didn't get to say this at all on the offensive side of the ball, but Jaleel Johnson returns.
Yes.
At one of those DN spots. Yep.
And Jaleel Johnson, for about a year and a half now, has kind of been tabbed as that next NFL dude. Last year, he had a ton of injuries, so he only got to play a handful of ball games. This should be that massive year for Jaleel. If Jaleel Johnson's going to put himself on the map for the NFL draft, it will be this season. And there does seem to be a lot of expectation that he's finally going to fulfill that level of talent that we were talking about last year. On the other side, man, you've also got another 5-year defensive end, Deshaun Brown, that has tons and tons and tons of snaps and starts at Oklahoma State. Both of them are Oklahoma dudes. Both of them have been here for 5 years. Both of them have seen the different iterations of Cowboy football. I think they're going to be major contributors on this defensive line. You got James Williams coming over from Florida State. You also got Jerry Lawson, defensive tackle down low that had a lot of SEC and Big Ten opportunities coming out of Louisville. Speaking of another Louisville guy, Sidney Clements went from Louisville to North Texas, had a big year last year at North Texas.
I noticed I'm like, oh, both these D tackles play together at Louisville. Yeah.
That's right. Well, and we also got Anai White at Penn State. Here's what I'll say. You mentioned Skylar Cassidy, right? And will there be some different wrinkles and things of that nature? It almost feels like, from a very 30,000-foot view, it almost feels like Skylar Cassidy has played to his roster the last 5 years. It almost feels like he always wanted to have a little bit more wild, wacky, and creative defense. He just didn't quite have the personnel to do it.
Makes sense.
And you got to think about it, man. At North Texas, could he go get a defensive end from Penn State? No. Could he go get Isaiah Chisholm, a linebacker that had 173 tackles at UCLA the last couple of years, 84 tackles alone this previous season? He was supposed to be a penciled-in day one starter. I mentioned the message boards. That was the other one. UCLA fans were losing their ever-loving mind because he was supposed to be a top priority for them.
Yeah.
He comes to Oklahoma State, and guess what? He gets passed up. He's not even probably going to start. He got passed up by Tate Romney, who hasn't played in 2.5 years.
I didn't know that one either. Both depth charts I looked at did have him listed as the starter. So the very good news about Romney there. Yeah, Romney, formerly BYU, Arizona State. I know he was a BYU guy, then went on his mission and left, ended up at ASU.
Correct.
And
he's got two brothers that are legacies at BYU. One of them played quarterback, the other played a linebacker. So he's got the pedigree, right? And I did reach out to some BYU people whenever it was announced that Tate Romney was passing Isaiah Chisholm. I was like, all right, give me a little secret behind the curtain. And everyone said collectively, athleticism, never a problem. Physicality, never a problem. Intelligence, never. Like, this is a football family. This is the families that eat KFC while watching film for dinner. Like, that's that kind of family that Tate Romney came from. So the mental side was always there. The physical side was always there. He just kept having injuries, like season-ending injuries. So nobody ever really got to see what Tate Romney could become. And now we're finally seeing it. And then if you do have some injuries at that spot, you know that you have Isaiah Chisholm that can come in, that has already produced at the Big Ten level. On top of that, I think you also got to take into consideration that you've got some guys returning, like Harvion Young, who's a 4-star recruit this previous season, 6'4", 235 pounds last year as a freshman. He's going to play that Colin Oliver, Von Miller kind of pseudo defensive end style of role. Gunnar Wilson has come back, 6'3", 222 pounds. That is another guy that played tight end for most of his career. He's kind of getting more familiar with the linebacker spot, but he's a guy that had 15, 16 tackles over the weekend, a few tackles for loss, a couple different sacks as a third stringer. Like, that's wild, awesome, man. And then you've got Trip White. Trip White is another backup linebacker who played 12 games the previous year at Ole Miss before coming to Oklahoma State. He might be the fastest linebacker on the roster. You also get Torian Davis from Mississippi Coast Community College, 6'2", 220-pound guy that has the ability to kind of flex and play multiple linebacker spots. I think those guys are going to factor into this season in a massive way to go alongside with the guy, Ethan Wisłowski, PFF's #1 linebacker in America, returning, baby.
I didn't know he was the #1 returner. I knew the number was high. I didn't know he was the #1. That's very impressive.
Yeah, that was just, they put that out 2 days ago.
Okay. Yeah. D-back wise too, there's some guys, Mose Phillips started at Virginia Tech, was at Baylor before. Evan Jackson comes over from North Texas. Both those safeties look pretty good. And I think they will pair well together, in being able to kind of do everything there.
Yeah, Mose Phillips is going to be a major contributor in this ball club. Another one is Vincent Holmes that came over from Washington. This Big Ten kind of feel I think is going to be fairly important for the Cowboys. You do bring in over Colin Lewis, who played cornerback last year at North Texas. He should be factoring into this ordeal. You got Mo Horn coming over from Texas Tech, who's an Oklahoma native, kind of coming back home, retracing his roots. He's going to be huge. The big one is obviously Daniel Fields, top 5 PFF, and returning limited catches. You mentioned it, the last 5 games of the year last year, it was a different Oklahoma State team. The last 3 games of the year, teams stopped throwing to his side of the field. We were a 1-win ball club, arguably the second worst team in all of college football, and teams refused to throw to number 9 at the end of the season. I think that was a pretty good prelude into what kind of talent level Daniel Fields could bring to the fold for Oklahoma State. And it does seem as though you're hearing that. Another big one.
And impressive that Fields would stick around, too, with all that turnover, that he would stay. That's important, I think, to look at.
Well, not only that, bro, his cousin transferred to K-State. So, the dude he came in with went to K-State, and I was like, oh, no. Because when we got Rodney Fields.
Rodney was his cousin? Okay, I didn't know that. Yeah, okay.
Daniel Fields was originally committed to TCU for quite some time. Rodney had to basically convince LaDainian to decommit from TCU and sign with Oklahoma State on National Signing Day, by the way. So none of us had any clue this was going to happen. And then so as soon as Rodney Fields entered the portal, it's like, oh, crap. Well, if Rodney convinced him to come to Stillwater, then he's probably going to go with Rodney to Kansas State. For him to stay, it's crazy. That's massive. I think that's a good indication on what kind of a young man he wants to be. And he is invested in Oklahoma State getting back to where we used to be in the heyday of Gundy.
Awesome. No, it's a good breakdown there.
I'll throw one more for you.
Please throw as many as you want. Yeah.
Well, you got Quentin Hammonds coming up from North Texas, 55 tackles this previous season from safety spot. He is going to be a mainstay starter. But the name
is going to be that nickel, that slot type guy.
Yeah, him and Evan Jackson. Yeah. Evan Jackson's been talked about a lot. So has Mose Phillips. So has Vincent Holmes. But I'll tell you a fun name that's been percolating a lot lately is Markeith Williams. We didn't pick him up till just a few weeks ago, essentially. He was an after spring transfer portal addition from Miami. Consensus 4-star All-American. He turned down Georgia, Alabama, LSU, Oregon, Indiana to go to Miami. Played, I think, 11 games last year at Miami. So he was a contributor on that Canes ball club. And now he's at Oklahoma State. He was a late addition, so nobody really thought he was going to factor in immediately. But his athleticism is off the charts. So he might end up being a late addition that does get some early playing time.
He must have been super late because he wasn't on my portal radar and the sources I usually use. So,
and we also got Cam Epps back. We got Cam Epps back, who 2 years ago was a huge safety for Oklahoma State, right? I think a lot of people look back that Kansas State game against Will Howard where he had multiple pick sixes. That kind of put him on the map. He was injured all of last year, didn't get to play at all. He's also back for the defense this year.
Okay. Good to know. Yeah. Honestly, he was one. I hate to say he was one of those guys, very good a couple of years ago. And then I just kind of figured he would be another guy that would probably leave and, play his last year somewhere else, go for a fresher for a year. But he stuck around. So good for him.
Yeah. And if I recall correctly, he's from the Missouri. Him or Jacoby Oliphant was from the Mizzou area. But nonetheless, he was going to
from St. Louis. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So you knew that there was teams that were one. I mean, Mizzou is famous for trying to steal Oklahoma State players. They were trying to get Nick Martin. They were trying to get Ollie Gordon. Yeah, dude.
Okay.
Mizzou loves tiptoeing into Stillwater to try to steal people.
Okay. I believe it. I mean, they have done a good job in the portal getting guys. That would not surprise me at all.
I know.
But I love that dive into the roster. That was fantastic. I do appreciate that. Looking at moving into this season, into expectations, what do you think are reasonable expectations for year one under Morris with all of these changes?
I think reasonable 7-5 with the talent
Okay.
acquisition, right? I've had this discussion. I was just on another show earlier today, and that host had Oklahoma State going 6-6, and I'm like, okay, that's commendable.
Yep.
That's respectable. After a 1-win season, we theoretically should be okay with that, but you don't go pay your quarterback $7.5 million to go 6-6. You don't go get the ready-made coach that's bringing in his basically entire staff and his GM and all of his best players to just go 6-6, right? 7-5 should be a reasonable expectation. I don't think there's anybody in Oklahoma State country that would be mad at 7-5. I don't necessarily think anyone would be mad with 6-6 per se either, but I do.
I mean, it's a 5-game increase from last year. That's really good in 1 year. Yeah,
I don't know, man. You're right. On paper, you're right. But when you have a projected top 10 quarterback.
I'm not saying 7-5 shouldn't be the goal. I was just saying a 5-game increase is good for anybody. Yeah.
No, like I said, at the end of the day, if we do go 6-6, nobody will be mad about it. I mean, we won't be elated. We won't be happy. We won't think we're on the road to a Big 12 title, but it'll be okay. I personally have us at 8-4. I think we should lose to Oregon. We should lose to Houston. We should lose to Texas Tech. Kansas State and Arizona State are toss-ups. I think we lose one of those, but not both of those.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with any of that. I just
think, man, even strictly from the offensive side of the ball, there's not going to be a crap ton of teams that can keep up with us in the conference.
Yeah. I think one interesting game that might be a make or break, if you want to go 8-4, that West Virginia game is critical because early in the year, they would be a team I would rather play, or you guys rather. I would rather play you guys early in the year than late. And with Rich Rod, they're going to run the ball heavy. They should be pretty fundamental. That's an important game in week 4.
I wholeheartedly agree with you. And I am firmly of the mind that if that game was the end of the season, I may tip the scales in West Virginia's favor, especially if it's a night game at the end of the season. But that's the benefit of this conversation is we do get them first Big 12 game of the year in week 4. And I do think that you're talking about two teams that both have 70 flipping transfers, right? But the difference between our transfers and North Texas's transfers is our transfers already know the offense. They already know the scheme. They already know the plays. They already have a ton of cohesion, a ton of continuity. I do think that West Virginia is going to be really good, but I do think it's going to take them a little bit longer than Oklahoma State to get every player on the same page and not have a lot of those brain farts. I think Oklahoma State will be able to start the season from a choreographed standpoint, much more advanced than West Virginia. By the end of the year, I could see West Virginia catching up to us, which is why I'm very grateful that we get them early and in the morning.
And I'm very, when I do, this conversation about the expectations, I always have a very big bandwidth of outcomes. It could be a doomsday scenario. It could be really good. I'm not that way with you guys, though. This is one of the narrow ones. I think this is between a 6-6 and an 8-4 team. And for me, that's a very narrow bandwidth. I think it's somewhere in that range.
That's fair. And, the Big 12 is synonymous for one-score ball games. And in one-score ball games, it's the luck of a bounce. Right, the ball bounces this way, it bounces that way, it bounces off the uprights, goes through the. One-score ball games always come down to that little stuff, and that is kind of what the Big 12 has been for at least the last handful of years. It's the conference of chaos. It's the conference of close ball games and overtimes, and where 16th can beat first place. And Oklahoma State should factor into that conversation very quickly.
I think so. Yeah. So, looking at the Big 12, if you were. I'll show this graphic up now just about Reed, who was one of my guests recently. He did this as his preview. And these are conference record only, obviously.
Okay.
If you were, I guess let's splice this out because you feel like tough to have three teams that only go 1-8 in the conference. And I also don't know that there's going to be 3 that go 8-1. So both of the ends that might be tough there. But in terms of at the top of the conference, I always ask, who would you pick to be the 2 teams that play for the conference title if you had to pick today?
BYU and Tech.
That's what I said. That's what Reed said. Sometimes the obvious and convenient pick is the one that you just default to, maybe because it's going to be right to it. Yeah.
Well, I mean, you just, from a talent perspective, nobody's going to be like Tech in the league, right? I think I saw a stat the other day. They brought in like 22. They averaged bringing in 20 4-star transfers. The rest of the Big 12 averages bringing in 2, right?
Oh, my God.
Yeah. So, I mean, this idea that Texas Tech is spinning their way to the top, it is legit. It is real.
Yes.
It is really happening. Yeah. So from a talent alone perspective, Texas Tech should be in the Big 12 title game. I don't care who their flipping quarterback is. If they do not make it to Arlington, it will be a major disappointment in Lubbock.
Absolutely.
For the roster that they have and the amount of money they spent on said roster. Additionally, I like to add, though, I would give the nod to BYU. Like, they're a machine under Kalani Sitake. They return like 83% of their production from this previous year. Arguably top 2 running back in the Big 12. They've upgraded at wide receiver. They've got 2 6'5" dudes that have a lot of vertical capabilities, which I think was something that hampered Bear Bachmeier this previous season. A lot of continuity on both sides of the ball, offensive, defensive line. They didn't lose.
I said both sides of the trenches, BYU will be very salty at.
Yeah, so I've got BYU winning the whole thing. I do think that it would be an egregious crime if Texas Tech didn't end up in Arlington. I don't fully disagree with the K-State thing. I have K-State as an 8-4, 9-3 kind of ball club, which is why I said it's a 50-50 ball game in Stillwater, Oklahoma. I do think that we have more potential NFL talent, but there's something to be said about that Colin Klein system. Like what he did with Marcel Reed at Texas A&M should be a carbon copy of what he can do with Avery Johnson at Kansas State. So I buy that one, but why the Houston disrespect, bro?
Great question. And I'm high on Houston this year. I think they're going to be a heck of a. Willie Fritz is a great head coach. Wegman has played well when he's been healthy. He just, up until last year, had not consistently stayed healthy any year in his career.
Yeah, they went. So here's my biggest thing with Houston. 2 years ago, they spent $2.4 million in NIL. Last year, they spent like almost 10. This year, they spent $26 million, buddy.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. Houston was tired of those I'm poor memes. And I don't know where they found these donors from. I don't know where all this money came from. But when you go from 10 mil to 26 million, it should be visible on the football field. And they've got, I think, 2 projected draft picks on the offensive line alone.
Yeah.
They return a lot of guys at defense. They have arguably the best wide receiver in the Big 12 in Amari Thomas.
Very good. Amari Thomas is good.
Willie Fritz defenses have always been a problem. They did go get Mekhi Hughes, who a lot of people thought was going to be the starter last year at Oregon, got buried on the depth chart after what, 1,500, 1,600 yard year at Tulane prior to his non-Oregon Duck days. If he gets back to that Tulane running back, like that dude's a problem. And I think
and their best D lineman, Ashton Porter, also came over from Oregon. Yeah, he's going to be good. Well,
you mentioned it. If Connor Weigman is healthy, I don't think maybe even it's just a body type kind of thing, NFL potential kind of thing. I think everybody in the country should get eyes on the Oklahoma State-Houston game because I think the Drew Mestemaker versus Connor Weigman battle might be the best quarterback duel we see in the Big 12 all season.
Yeah, definitely. I would say that. And if it's not, then that game could be Avery Johnson versus Drew Mestemaker.
Yeah, so, absolutely. Absolutely. And one team I think we could cross off here. I don't understand this love for Utah, bro. They lost their head coach.
Yeah, I
They
think
lost.
people think it will be the continuity, and a lot of people are high on Devin Dampier.
Yeah, but they lost 8 linemen, bro. They
They
lost
did. Yeah.
8 defensive and offensive linemen. And they lost all of their best players for the most part on the defensive side of the ball. You could make the argument that their offensive coordinator was one of the top 3 best offensive coordinators in the country.
Mm-hmm.
When you don't have all of that at your disposal anymore, I just don't know how much you can fully rely on Devin Dampier.
Absolutely.
Like that's putting a lot of weight on one player.
It is. Yeah. And a player who at times has struggled throwing the ball in his career too. So I know.
Yeah, if it was a track meet, you could probably put 8-1 next to Utah, but it's not. It's a football game.
Yeah. I know you guys don't play them. I think Arizona's going to be solid this year too, but better. Fafita coming back is good, and that roster looks all right. They also, for them, that schedule comes out pretty near. You have BYU in week 2, but you don't play Oklahoma State. They probably will lose to Tech, but it looks like they're playing a lot of the teams you'd want to play to.
So, yeah, I think they should be pretty darn good. I think Noah Fafita is definitely in that conversation for top 2 or 3 best quarterbacks in the conference relatively easily. Yep. I do believe they lost some guys on defense that were fairly important, but don't quote me.
Yeah.
I also know that 2 years ago they had not only the best wide receiver core in the Big 12, but arguably one of the best wide receiver cores in America.
Yeah,
I believe in Noah Fafita. I think he's either 2 or 3 best quarterbacks in the league, but I also think that he got a lot of benefit from some of his wide receiver core, and I just don't know that they've addressed it quite to the degree they did a couple years ago, but I could be very, very wrong. I will be the first one to admit to you, I haven't done a ton of studying on Arizona this upcoming season, so I may be way over my skis on that one.
No, I think that's fair. Yeah. And on defense, they did lose some key pieces. We do know that. Let's looking at the bottom here. So, let's go from Baylor down. I think Kansas might be a little better than 2-7 in the conference, but
they should be.
Yeah.
They better be for Lance Leipold's sake.
And that brings us to Dave Aranda, who I think is on the hottest seat in the conference. Frankly, we can make the case he shouldn't be there anymore, but he still is.
Oh yeah.
I mean, that year they won the conference has added years to his shelf life at Baylor.
Yeah, well, we have never forgiven Dave Aranda for that day.
Yep,
and we never will.
I don't blame you. It's I was watching. I remember when it happened. So,
man, there's that moment and the missed field goal against Iowa State in 2011 that kept us out of the national title game are the two. Yep. Those are the 2 most heartbreaking moments in my Oklahoma State fandom. But you wanted to go from Baylor down. I'm going to throw a little wrinkle at you. I think UCF is a sleeper team. UCF, I think, could be fairly dangerous because
they have some talent on that team. That's for sure.
I mean, Alonzo Barnett was a bad mamma jamma at JMU. Yep. I think he has a lot of commonality with Noah Fafita, right? He's like a little bit smaller version of Noah Fafita, and he's even self-described himself as a point guard, which I've never heard a quarterback refer to himself as. He calls himself the point guard of the football team. And if you go back and look at the Scott Frost heyday, he always had basically a running back, a quarterback that could adequately throw the football. He always had, a good stable of guys on the outside. I think he's got that. And last year,
Dylan Wade's one of the best tight ends of the conference.
What kept UCF even close to being in ball games last year was primarily their defense. Like, who would have thought that Scott Frost would have an upper Big 12 shelf defense last year? But he did. So it wasn't the offense that let UCF down last year. It was the D. I think they've got some guys back. I think they were fairly aggressive in the transfer portal. If Barnett is healthy, they could be sneaky, buddy. They could be sneaky. Kansas should be better than 2-7 because they've invested a lot in Kansas football and Lance Leipold and that roster here relatively recently. West Virginia, that's way too low for West Virginia. That's crazy. That's crazy low.
The team I don't I don't know if Cincinnati's as good as they were. Like, they had struggled 2 years under Satterfield. Last year, they were better. I don't know enough about Cincinnati this year to accurately say where I think they're going to be.
I don't think they're going to be great. I believe they went and got J.C. French out of the
they did from Georgia Southern. Yep.
Okay. Yeah. So their offense should look something like it did under Brandon Sorsby without the same level of talent. Yeah. And unfortunately, Cincinnati has almost become, I don't know, the little brother that every team in the conference picks on. Like every year, Cincinnati's losing their best players to other Big 12 schools. Like that's the worst part. Yeah. I hate the fact that they're getting cannibalized by their own conference mates every year, but you know the drill. You got to poop or get off the pot. If you're having people come in and swoop your players away, you either got to upgrade the facilities, you got to upgrade NIL, you got to upgrade coaching. You got to do something to keep the dudes there because Luke Fickell didn't have that problem. Like he was able to keep the Desmond Ritters of the world right there in town. That is something that Satterfield has not been able to do. I think he's a pretty decent coach, but roster retention has been abysmal.
Yeah. I mean, you lose Sorsby, you lose Evan Pryor, your best running back to Florida, to a job where he's not even going to be the number one there.
No, Jordan Ball is going to be a dude.
Yes, very good.
Jaden Ball, my bad.
Jaden, yep. And receiver, it's a totally new receiver room at Cincinnati too. But very few guys that were at P4 schools, and the ones that were backup. So it's a lot of guys that it's going to be a step up level for them.
I agree. Let's see, Colorado, Iowa State. Yeah, I think they're both going to be in trouble. I just do.
And I think Iowa State will be okay. Jimmy Rogers, I think, is a good head coach. I think he will do well. But this year, I don't think it will happen. I think they're going to be in for a tough luck in 2026.
I tell you something fun, man. And I talked about this on my show when the decision was made for Matt Campbell to leave, and then they did finally bring Jimmy Rogers in. And I was pretty excited about a new era to some degree. Like it's really hard to replace a guy like Matt Campbell over money issues. Like whenever Matt Campbell comes out and talk about retention, he was able to keep Rocco Becht and their star tight end and their star running backs. Like he had good retention at Iowa State, which didn't have a lot of money. And then that doofus of an AD gets in front of a camera and says, "We don't have any money. It's going to be hard for us to be competitive in NIL." No wonder he left for flipping Penn State.
Yeah.
So because of some of that adversity that they're already going through and the fact that Washington State got put in the position where they were no longer in a Power 4 conference, I was excited. I was pumped. I believe in Jalen Raynor. I think athletically, he is going to be one of the better athletes in the Big 12.
And he knows that system, too, because he followed his old coordinator from Arkansas State. Yeah.
But here's where I backed up like a crawdad in the water on Jimmy Rogers. How delusional is this dude? Like, it's one thing to be confident, okay? You need confidence in this industry. But to boldface say that you're going to win the Big 12 year one, no questions asked, and then expose yourself, like that was an anonymous deal. Why would you do that? Why would you do that? Like I made jokes, like if I'm going through recruiting or my son's going through recruiting, I want my coach to be confident, but I also want him to have a little bit of honesty built in there. And for him to look at the roster and look at the position that Iowa State has been in and waste a vote, I think shows that his character may be a little less than desirable. I would love to be proven wrong, but I can't stand that crap, man. I thought it was a horrendous look. I don't think it's good for Iowa State, and I think it's going to backfire. Like you cannot proclaim yourself as the champion and then get 16th place. Like that cannot happen.
No, you can't. Yeah. And I think this year they're going to be very poor. Long term, I do have some faith in Ron. And you had mentioned the AD. He's retiring. He's announced that. He's the longest tenured P4 AD in the country, 21. I think this will be his 22nd year. He was an Iowa State lifer, essentially, but he's on his way out now. We know that. So,
yeah, you can't be putting your foot in your mouth like that. I mean, I think even to some degree, you look at Mike Gundy. What was the moment, the quintessential moment that Oklahoma State fans that had been diehard mullet-wearing Gundy people for life, where they finally was like, hold on, hold on, wait a second. When Mike Gundy got in front of a camera and started saying that the only fans that are complaining about what's happening are the fans that are living in their mama's basement and too poor to pay their own bills. That was the moment that even I had some donor buddies that was like, "Oh, why would you say that?
Exactly.
Why would you alienate your fan base like that?"
It was such an unforced error. Yeah.
I think that was the Jamie Pollard moment at Iowa State. And again, I think Matt Campbell saw that and he's like, why are you telling the world that you can't afford to be competitive? Why would you do that?
Yeah. That's one of those things. Even if it's true, you keep it to yourself. Yeah.
Like it's one thing, like Calvin Sampson and Kalani Sitake have both alluded to needing more money. Mike Gundy even kind of alluded to before the Oregon game that we needed more money. That's one thing. It's another thing to just flat out call your fan base stupid and poor.
Yes.
Like who does that?
Boy. Yeah. That's
wild times. But again, without Mike Gundy's 18 phenomenal years of his 21, we don't have the foundation that we have now to go get Eric Morris and Drew Mestemaker and Caleb Hawkins. Without 18 years of remarkable competing for Big 12 titles almost every year success, you do not have that investment go from 12 mil to 24 mil.
And it's also, I think, looking at the state of the programs from the outside, we were just talking about Jimmy Rogers. For him, that might be a step. He's a Midwest guy, but, we view some jobs as stepping stones. If Rogers does there, we look at him to bump up. And that's a commonality. We don't really say that with Eric Morris. Nobody really views Oklahoma State as a stepping stone, which says something to the foundation that he inherited.
Yeah, because
as bad as the last couple of years were. Yeah.
Because he's that kind of guy. Like he is a small town, farming, West Texas, go hunting armadillos and things that he's just that kind of guy, and Stillwater fits everything. It's the same thing as when David Taylor came over from wrestling and Penn State was freaking out. How could he do this? How could he leave Cale? It's because he's a farm boy. I didn't know there was a bunch of farms all over Pennsylvania, but you learn something new every day. That was part of the allure was Stillwater does everything that he likes and loves and he's comfortable with. He wants to ride horses and ride four-wheelers and have some land to go do stuff on. Stillwater does the same thing for Eric Morris. So with that, I will say Oklahoma State fans were really only afraid of one thing, and that is Joey McGuire failing and them swooping up Eric Morris. I genuinely believe if Eric Morris got an opportunity to go to Alabama, I don't think he would do it. But if he had the opportunity to go to Texas Tech in the next 4 or 5 years, he might do that.
And that's an interesting hypothetical of a school with that much money. They will want a proven P4 head coach. They will get one. It's just, who's it going to be? Yeah.
Very fair. Very fair. Yeah, I think my only fear is that Texas Tech nosedives and they come swoop up Eric Morris before he can really get – because I think if they wait 8, 9, 10 years, he might be so entrenched in Stillwater that he is not interested anymore in leaving. Do
you go back to the air raid mentality and try to pull Lincoln Riley? I don't know.
No. Don't say that dirty word. Even though, I
mostly said that to see your reaction.
we should love Lincoln Riley. Because of Lincoln Riley, we got to win 2 of the last 3 Bedlams. I mean, so really, we should love Lincoln Riley. But the worst thing that could happen for us is Texas Tech being bad. So to be honest with you, we need Joe McGuire and Texas Tech to keep doing what they're doing so we can keep Eric Morris. And because a lot of his staff, Skylar Cassidy, Sean Brophy, I think even Greg Richmond, a lot of the staff has old Texas Tech connections, 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020. Some of them are still super, super tight with Cody Campbell. Not Cody Campbell, the donor, but Cody Campbell, the coach.
Oh, yes. Okay. Yeah.
So there's,
interesting.
And that's why you're probably not going to see a lot of vitriolic responses out of Oklahoma State and Texas Tech, is because our coaching staffs are buddies. You know what I mean? Like they don't hate each other. They probably talk on a weekly basis. We know that they go hunting together because Eric Morris has said so. So we need Texas Tech to keep being good so we can kind of stay where we're at too.
I like that. You learn something new every day. That's good insight. But we have reached our conclusion here, Cody. I want to say, great having. I learned so much about, a roster and team where there were not many that had more turnover this offseason than you guys did. So it's great, just learn on taking all of this in. But I want to thank you for being here, as usual, for all of our listeners out there. You'll be able to easily follow him at All Day O State and then Locked On. Should you choose to, that'll all be tagged. But thank you for being here, and go Pokes. Yep. I love how we just got crossed with the yep.
No, you're good. Here, my closing remark. You don't have to like Oklahoma State or the Big 12 to tune in to the Cowboys this season. If you like football, and you like offensive firepower, you like seeing the ball go across the goal line and people put up 55, 65 points because it's fun, Oklahoma State is the team to tune into this upcoming season.
Awesome. Absolutely. Thank you for saying that. And everybody, I appreciate you being here. Thank you.